Welcome to today's 8Talk. Today we're discussing the use of WebAR portals as tools for brand engagement. Tom Emrich is joined by Rachel Soble of Anheuser-Busch InBev and Adin Gold of Aircards, who created a WebAR portal for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold.
Rachel, thanks so much for being here. Before we get into our conversation, I'd love to give you the chance to say hi and introduce yourself. Let's start with Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Soble, and I am the Senior Trade Experience Manager for Anheuser-Busch InBev. I primarily cover our Western region, which focuses on California, Arizona, Nevada, and Hawaii. I mostly cover sales events and our on-premise strategy, so referring there to bars and restaurants and the strategy to get sell-in, product distribution, so on and so forth. However, with the landscape changing a little bit, we're looking for new ways to engage consumers, and this is how we kind of turned to Aircards.
That's great. Adin, your turn.
Sure, thanks, Tom. Adin Gold here, head of AR at Aircards. I lead the 3D content creation and WebAR development teams here, and we focus primarily on building web-based AR and VR experiences for our clients.
And Adin, on that point, you do at Aircards focus solely on WebAR and WebVR to deliver value to your clients. So maybe this is a good place to start to talk about what WebAR is and why your team is so committed to this as a solution.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess to start, historically, one of the biggest barriers to engaging with an AR experience was the need to download an app. It just was a lot to ask of a consumer to go to the App Store, download an app to view an experience. And part of what 8Talks has enabled is web-based augmented reality or appless augmented reality, which exists entirely within a user's web browser, Safari on iOS and various browsers on Android. And so all the user needs to do is access a link through a QR code or through various social media distribution methods in order to view an immersive experience. So here at Aircards, we focus on building these experiences. We work with a variety of clients across a number of sectors. Some of our recent clients are Samsung, Dell, Unilever, Kinder, and then of course AB InBev. And we like to consider ourselves as an end-to-end service. So we'll work at the very beginning of the process to ideate and figure out just where in the sort of brand's marketing goals or roadmap AR might sit, and then to actually go ahead and plan out the project, build out the 3D assets, develop the experience. And then on the tail end, we'll manage all the hosting, web analytics and spatial analytics. So dealing with, tracking how users interact with the various elements of the scene, tracking where they are, what they're tapping on, how long they're engaging, and then, bundling that into a full solution for our clients. And yeah, love to dive into the details on how we work together with AB InBev on this specific project.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Adin. Before we do that, Rachel, Anheuser-Busch is investing in various emerging technologies to achieve your goals. What are these types of technologies and innovative solutions you're looking at? And what do you consider when thinking about adding them into your marketing mix?
For sure. So when thinking about our marketing strategies, we tend to look to the year 2050. How do we go above and beyond the standard TV commercial, billboard, signage that we've done for decades? Now, we obviously still do that. You'll see many AB Super Bowl commercials, many billboards along the freeway, et cetera. But we're also looking at ways to incorporate technology more and more into our plans, especially given the recent surge of e-commerce sales and the platforms that are associated with those. Our strategy is also to kind of look at the pre, during, and post shop that the consumers tend to go through. So pre-shop, getting them into the retailers or onto those online platforms to give them the opportunity to buy, whether through discounts, et cetera. The the during, enticing them to buy our product over another, whether that's just integration on the shelf or on the platform itself, bringing it closer together or closer to the top. So that's the first thing you see, search engine optimization, or in the post shop, having something through rewards programs, et cetera, like that, to engage them even after they've left the store or gotten off the site. So this, for instance, was more primarily focused on the pre-shop, getting people aware of our brand and engaging them to buy through an e-commerce platform.
Okay, and that's a good segue into the specific campaign that you worked on with Aircards. So you have an in-market example for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold campaign that is a WebAR portal. Before we get into talking about some of the insights around design and development, the overall flow, can you speak to a little bit of the goals that you had for the campaign and who the target audience was?
Sure. Being that Michelob Ultra Pure Gold was a newer brand, it's only a few years old. First and foremost, the goal of our program was to raise brand awareness for Michelob Ultra Pure Gold. We also had a connection to nature, being that Michelob Ultra Pure Gold is the first USDA organic beer. So kind of re-establishing that connection between nature and our brand was super authentic for this AR experience in particular, and having it based in Yosemite National Park. We also identified a rising trend of consumers kind of feeling trapped in their homes, wanting to get outdoors, but not being able to take those international flights that they had previously planned. And so a lot of them are getting outside, going to national parks. And so we wanted to capitalize on a rising trend and make sure that we were driving the association between our brand and that trend, so that it would also kind of raise the trend of sales.
And you kind of hinted at this with people not being able to travel, but how did the pandemic impact and influence your decision making? Did it change the plans and the course of this campaign, and encourage you to look at WebAR? Maybe if you could speak a little bit to that, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. The pandemic and the associated quarantine that came with it played a huge role in our decision making to produce an AR experience. Normally, when we're trying to raise brand awareness, our main goal is to get liquid to lips or have people actually out there trying the brand. And we tend to do so through events or sampling in bars and restaurants or even in the grocery stores themselves. However, with COVID being such a concern and hygiene and everything like that, having people just pass out liquid was not going to be feasible. So this was kind of a way for us to uniquely and in a fun way have people interact and engage with the brand without having any risk associated with that. So it also allows those that are stuck at home to be almost transported to another world, even if they are physically unable to. So in this case, it was Yosemite National Park, and they could enter the portal and be almost transported into the valley just looking through their phone.
And thanks for that, Rachel, because I think one of the things that I love about augmented reality is its ability to strengthen a place, meaning you need to go to a specific place to experience augmented reality, while at the same time removing the need to have to be in any place and bringing the place to where you are, right? Which is this is such a fantastic example of that. And like you were saying and speaking to at a time when folks aren't able to leave home, bringing the experience to the consumer is the strategy that needs to be tackled today. And I'm sure that our audience saw that very clearly in the example video that was played just before our conversation with the Michelob campaign. Adin, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you determined that the WebAR portal experience was the right experience, and break down, the user flow for our audience.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, we love WebAR and WebVR portals really because they unlock a whole lot of physical space for us to deploy interactive content. If you're looking, just to sidestep for a moment, if you're looking at a sort of an AR experience where you can tap to place some content on the table in front of you, or augment it onto a smaller surface in front of you, you're obviously limited with the sort of physical space that you have to play with. But WebAR portals really unlock an entire scene around the user. So you're able to show users more branded content, interactive 3D models, and just allow them to explore it in a more sort of free way than they would if they would just be looking at a piece of content in front of them. In terms of the actual portal flow, we work really hard here at Aircards to optimize user experience and to make sure that instructions are always clear and simple, and that users are never left sort of wondering what they need to do next. And so, throughout the process, we worked with Rachel and her team to just make sure that all the messaging was sort of natural and just felt smooth to users and was easy to understand. At the beginning of the experience, we give the users a splash screen where they're actually prompted to select their language. So this was, as a side note, this campaign was produced in both English and Spanish. So we translated all of the AR content and the copy into both English and Spanish. After the user passes that initial sort of launch screen, they're prompted to tap to place the portal in their environment. And then we show them the instruction to sort of open the door to the portal, walk inside, and explore around. In terms of the actual content that exists within the scene, we really wanted to go for a Yosemite campsite kind of feeling. So we deployed a camping table or a picnic table equipped with some camping food, and of course some pure gold beer bottles and a cooler full of some beer. And then we also put a campfire in the scene with some other chairs next to the campfire, and had a video playing in the background with the waterfall. So all sorts of different things for the user to discover around the scene. And then just to zoom in a little bit on one of the elements, we actually included a 3D model of the actual beer bottle and built out an animation where the user could actually pick up the beer bottle, hold it in front of them, and read a little bit about the brand. So just Rachel, going back to what you're saying about bringing liquid to lips, obviously that's a challenge to do with your consumers physically these days. But we are happy that we are able to do that digitally by allowing them to lift up a virtual version of the beer bottle. And then go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say one unique thing about the portal specifically for the campaign that we're doing is we're also running a sweepstakes that is tied into the AR experience, where a consumer will actually enter for a chance to win a real trip to Yosemite and stay in one of the yurts that are pictured within the AR experience. So Adin and his team actually took some pictures of the real yurt that they would be staying in and incorporated it into the AR experience. So it just turned out to be this full 360 approach, and it looked beautiful when it was finalized and actually released.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Just a nice little touch.
Definitely, it was definitely a challenge to mimic the actual look of the tents or the yurts that would be rewarded to the winner of the sweepstakes. But yeah, we were happy with the result, and we hope that it gave users not only a taste of the brand, but a taste of what they might be able to win if they enroll in the sweepstakes. And then of course, I didn't mention it yet, but there was a call to action button to an e-commerce site where the users could go ahead and purchase a 6-pack of beer after they were done engaging with the experience.
That's great. Thanks, Adin and Rachel. I could say, like, from using it myself, one of the things that I really enjoyed was just continually discovering the details that were within the nature experience. I know that when we had first talked, I was saying that I had some really great experiences about going to different corners and finding some Anheuser-Busch products. And just like the details, like Rachel was really trying to point out with the yurt and the cooler, you really have a great time of picking up on those. And I'm wondering, Rachel, like what that means to you as the brand owner and the brand champion. How does this really elevate the overall experience for your consumer and allow for you to achieve your goals in different ways? I'm sure, just speaking to that this type of like detail-oriented approach would be something you may think about in more of a physical experiential marketing campaign that may be outdoors. So it's interesting to take that in a digital way.
Yeah, they did such an amazing job just with all of the specific details that were surrounding the brand and making it feel natural and incorporated into the scene in an authentic way, which I think really resonates with the brand and, the whole experience as a whole. Like you said, they incorporated our biodegradable cooler, which will actually be seen in stores in the summer of 2021. So just having that small little call out and attention to detail, it may be something that is overlooked by consumers right now, but if they eventually see it in stores, they'll be like, wait, I've seen that before. So it's just something cool like that. And actually having, the experience kind of take place in the valley in which the consumer will eventually, the winner will eventually get to go, just really, again, brings that whole connection between nature and our brand in a seamless, authentic way. So I think they've done a fantastic job.
And thinking back to the design process, the design and development process of this WebAR portal campaign, Adin and Rachel, what are some of the lessons learned or insights or any inside storytelling that you can share that might be helpful for our audience members today that are thinking about going through the same process?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that one key lesson learned just on the user experience and user interface side is that, well, to give an example, we've all been in a situation where we've gotten a physical product, we haven't read the instructions manual, we've tried to assemble it or use it, and then we haven't really, I personally have been in that situation where I've been lost and had to refer back to the instructions. So taking that sort of theme in mind, rather than bombarding the user at the very beginning of the experience with a list of the 5 or 7 different ways of interacting with the experience in that sort of initial view, we took the approach of sort of splitting that up and showing the user instructions periodically at the appropriate time while they walked into the portal, while they looked at the beer bottle on the table, and sort of giving them instructions at the appropriate time rather than overwhelming them at the beginning where they might have not read the full list or forgotten some of the techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that the way that we did it as well kind of allowed our consumer to come in and stay within the AR experience for a longer period of time, which just means they're engaging and interacting with your brand even longer, which is obviously the goal of the experience itself. So I think just having it as almost a story or a transition through the steps rather than bombarding, like you said, everything at once allowed it to be a little bit more drawn out experience. So I think it was very successful in that sense.
That's interesting because I think I was speaking a little bit to the feeling of discovery with this WebAR portal. And it seems like this was by design from what you're saying, which is, not trying to give away everything as soon as you open your browser page, but allow for people to stumble upon and find things in their own pace, at their own time, and then be able to engage and give them the instructions and the guidance only at that point of engagement. That's great. Rachel?
Yeah, and so just to touch on that a little bit further, is the goal of any marketing campaign is to have it be an earned media moment and make sure that it's being shared and it's not being pushed out necessarily by us, but other consumers are encouraging another person to go on and try that experience. So if you have a journey that in every single time that you use it, you're seeing something new or discovering something new, it engages them even longer. And you can say oh, I missed that the first time. You saw that, that's so cool. It's almost like they're on a whole different trip.
Exactly. And I think dwell time is one of those amazing metrics for WebAR. I know that on the industry average is well over 2 minutes in some cases for WebAR experience. And that's really gold when it comes to, as you mentioned, a brand marketer. Rachel, what are some other insights or metrics that you're looking at when thinking about the measurement of this campaign?
Yeah, so we primarily looked at, the length of the time as well as click-throughs. So they were able to show us exactly what the consumer clicked on and how many times and how many people clicked on this certain thing and the percentage of the users that viewed the experience versus actually click through to say the sweepstakes or to the e-commerce platform. So I thought that was amazing. They were also able to show us exactly where the consumers are clicking in from. So if we're promoting this on Facebook, say, they were able to show this is exactly where they clicked through from. So that was a really amazing insight that we weren't aware of at first, because it also shows us the success of our media push behind it as well.
Okay, that's great. And that actually leads me into a part of the conversation that I think is really important when it comes to any augmented reality experience, particular to WebAR, which is about distribution and discovery. And I'd love to hear from both you and Adin, starting maybe with Rachel, on just what your distribution, your discovery strategy was. Already we're hearing that leveraging Facebook may have been part of that, but how did you, how do you ensure that your target audience is finding the experience? And then also maybe speak a little bit to the messaging that's needed to help them understand, what a portal is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to answer your first question, we took many different approaches to get this out there. We wanted as much coverage as possible. So first and foremost, we did it through social, mostly media pushes through Facebook and Instagram were the primary, because they're so visual. So it was able to get that full visual of our copy and everything first, our creative, and then have the click-through link available through that. We also used the use of our Pure Gold influencers, who are able to show that they're engaging with the AR experience and say, hey, click here if you want to try it out. Adin and his team also did an amazing job of putting together kind of a promo video of a model walking through a downtown LA scene or something similar, and how she is walking through the experience. So we'll definitely utilize that in our next media push that will be going out in November. Second to last, we used a lot of our other partners. So excited to announce that the 49ers will also be putting some paid social behind this, because a lot of it does take place in kind of their Northern California territory. And that is one of the target consumers or target demographics that we're looking at, is that territory and geography. And then last but not least, we also incorporated it into retail through the use of QR codes. I think with the leap in technology, as I mentioned earlier, QR codes are becoming more and more visible to consumers, and they're interacting with it a lot more compared to even just a year ago, especially in the on-premise or the bars and restaurants, where a lot of these restaurants now have to have a QR code menu where the consumer can scan to actually see the menu. So there are a lot of them are more and more recognizing that as a means of taking them somewhere else, and they're interacting with that. However, in our copy, we obviously had a call out that says, hey, scan here to get an augmented reality trip to Yosemite, just to make sure that it was super clear what it was. They're not getting a menu from that sticker or something else. We just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, it's always something we focus on a lot, making sure that consumers don't see a QR code and think it just links to some random web page. We always like to be sure that the words augmented reality or immersive experience or something along those lines is clearly noted, just to sort of tease the user a little bit and get them interested, and really educate them that there is something else that's a bit more immersive and engaging behind the QR code, since many users are not expecting to have the kind of experience that we did build behind a QR code.
And Adin, I know you worked on a number of WebAR and AR and VR experiences. Any other best practices or tips and tricks to just ensure that the end user is really clear on what they're going to be experiencing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, as Rachel said, calling out augmented reality on the actual print activation item is really important. And then of course, just making sure that as many distribution channels as possible are used to drive users to the experience. Since really all you need to do is access a link in order to access a WebAR experience. Really all of the sort of more traditional marketing channels that many brands and agencies are used to can be used to activate an AR experience. So we always like to emphasize, use every single channel that's available to you. There's no reason why you shouldn't post a link out on all of your social channels and send out an email blast and text it out. Just to sort of capture as much of the audience as possible. Mm-hmm. And then in terms, so that was related to the distribution. I think one other key recommendation that we always focus on, just really relating to the actual content of the experience, It's a pretty well-established notion that the longer the load time for any web page, but especially for an AR experience, the longer the load time, the more drop off. And so we work really hard on every single experience to optimize all of the media files, all the assets that go into the scene to make sure that the file size is as low as possible, which then, of course, decreases the load time because you're downloading fewer assets or smaller assets. And then that in turn, that lower load time really just directly converts to an increase in engagement. So we really always focus on that connection between optimizing assets, decreasing load time, and then the direct boost in engagement that we see from having shorter load times for our experiences.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, and I think that was also a difficult thing for us because we had another hurdle or another step that the consumers had to go through to get to the experience, being the age gate. So with any campaign with an alcoholic beverage, we need to make sure the consumer's over 21 plus. So just making sure that we have everything else in place so as not to discourage them any further from actually interacting with it.
And since we're on this topic, what are some other insights that you've gleaned so far in users engaging with the campaign, or just from this overall experience?
I would say that another insight that we kind of worked through and learned as we went was just having the space necessary to interact properly with the AR experience. For instance, with ours being a portal, you had to actually get up and walk around to make sure that you were experiencing it properly. And going through the portal, maybe just making sure that there was an attention to detail where it calls out, hey, take a step forward, because it was sometimes unclear when we were in the early development stages that they actually had to walk forward to enter the full Yosemite landscape. So that was something that was new to me and was an interesting learning as we kind of went through the experience in the development.
So just to expand on that, many users aren't accustomed to needing to stand up and needing to find a wide open area before they can view a web page, right? We're used to just sitting down or staying in a single place while we're viewing a web page. For a portal, obviously, you need a 5 foot by 5 foot or 10 foot by 10 foot, depending on the scale of the scene. You need a pretty wide open area so you don't walk into a wall or walk into a couch or into the street. So it was really important for us to just sort of subtly drop that into the activation instructions to say, find a wide open area, find a clear open space before you tap to place the portal, just to ensure that users were sort of poised and ready to experience the portal before they sort of activate it.
That's great. And I could see for some, augmented reality is a new experience. And so making it very clear how this user journey should play out and keeping people safe, reducing that friction, Rachel, as you mentioned, and understanding where friction is mandatory in terms of an age gate, but where you need to create more of a trade-off and reduce on the other side. I think all of these great lessons learned are exactly why it is the right time to get into augmented reality now, to really start ramping up on this new lexicon and way of thinking about user experience and user behavior, and also gain some critical learnings to be able to continue to roll out experiences like this. Now, to the audience on Zoom, we're going to be asking you to raise your hand and ask some questions. I'll be looking into the Q&A panel and taking out some of the questions. I see you're already doing that right now. At the end of this experience, I see some people really itching to be able to try this WebAR portal campaign themselves. We will be putting up a QR code. You will be able to scan and head into nature. We promise you that before the webinar is over, so hang on to your hats. I'd like to move our conversation into a little bit about talking about the food and beverage industry and how augmented reality is evolving the food and beverage industry. Maybe Rachel, since you're on the ground floor, if you can help us understand how AR is changing the industry that you're working in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I think, as you mentioned, AR is still a relatively new field, so we haven't seen a ton of new examples for augmented reality built into brand plans and marketing strategies. However, we have had a couple just specifically working with Aircards and our brand, so I can kind of go through that. What introduced me to Aircards in the first place was another brand manager working with Adin and kind of creating this experience for Bon Viv, which is one of our newer seltzer brands. They created an interactive billboard. So moving away from, that standard static image to actually invite consumers into the brand messaging in a more dynamic way. So what I believe they did, and Adin, you can totally jump in here if I butcher it or anything, but they scanned the QR code and essentially a vending machine full of Bon Vivs appeared before your eyes. And then you could actually select what flavor you wanted, and it would kind of, as similarly to how you can hold the pure gold bottle for us, you could hold the Bon Viv and it would drop out of the vending machine and then you could hold it. And then from there was either a product locator or an actual direct link to an e-commerce platform where you could buy the brand. Additionally, like most recently with the Dodgers winning the World Series, go us, Golden Road did a filter, kind of a celebratory filter. And Adin, I'm sure you could talk a little bit more on exactly what else is involved with that. But I know that that's something that we also did.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you nailed it with the Bon Viv outline. That was a fun one to work on. And then for the Golden Road project, that actually just launched today to celebrate the Dodgers winning the World Series. And so that is a WebAR face filter, and it's going to be activated. I believe that there is an ad in the LA Times today, if not tomorrow, with a QR code on it where you can go and scan the QR code and then activate this WebAR face filter. And then there's also going to be another out-of-home activation on Venice Beach in LA for that experience. And it's essentially just, in short, the flow there is that there's yet another digital version of the beer can that sort of pops up in front of the user. It cracks open, and then we have some confetti that falls around the user, and it's all branded with baseballs and the Dodgers logo, and then the Golden Road branding as well. And then for that experience, the user has the option to go ahead and locate a product in a product locator, or they also have the option to record a brief snippet in their web browser of themselves with all this confetti falling down with a bottle of the beer right next to them, and then they can download and share that. So really just giving the user options, go find the product or share this experience that you had on your own with one of your friends or family members.
So when they also, I'm not too familiar with this latest campaign, when they share it to social, is there also a link for them to go on and try the filter for themselves, or is that something?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's cool. a big part of this whole recording and sharing yourself experiencing the filter is spreading awareness and then increasing the likelihood of other people seeing it and wanting to try it. So we do show the URL to the experience at the end of that video recording. Using 8Talks built-in browser media recorder, so that users who view this little video snippet or a screenshot are able to then go and say, oh, I want to try that. Let me try that.
Yeah, what I like about that is how it underscores how augmented reality really is a living medium, which is very different than like a photo or a video. So we share GIFs and photos and videos it's just normal behavior now, and you get to watch it. The action is watch. It's a very passive action. But here, like as Rachel, as you're pointing out, and Adin, as you underscored, it's not just like seeing your friend do it, but having a link to be able to be in the video, like create your own video from the same experience, and that loop continues. So that's a really powerful, engagement opportunity. Adin, maybe just looping back on the food and beverage industry, or just industry at large, you again work with a lot of different brands and clients, and have worked on a lot of different projects, the AB InBev in particular. Like, how are you seeing industry change with WebAR, with augmented reality in general?
Yeah, sure. Happy to touch on that. I think I like to break down augmented reality by the sort of types of AR. So just spoke about AR face filters, and then obviously within each of these you can have various forms of content. AR face filters, markerless AR, which is sort of using the world around you to track the content into your own environment, and then marker-based AR, which is using a flat surface or or a curved surface like a beer can or a bottle, and augmenting some content onto that. So specifically with respect to the beverage industry, I mean, we just spoke to a few examples of face filters and then marker lists, AR, where you're tapping to place some content like a portal or a vending machine on the ground in front of you, and then for the face filter, augmenting that onto and around your face. I think that where we see more and more experiences living is actually on the face of these curved and flat products. And 8Talks recently released the ability to smoothly track content onto these kinds of curved surfaces. So we're really excited now that this is sort of just becoming available in a sort of a large scale commercial way. We're excited to be using this in new ways to bring products to life and sort of create experiences that weren't really possible before on the web.
That's great. That's fantastic. We're really excited about curved image targets too. So glad to hear that you're both also smiling and nodding. Okay, I'm going to go into our audience Q&A. One of the questions that are is coming up is around timing from concept to launch. If you're able to speak a little bit about how much time did this take from concept to launch to give our audience an idea of that development and design process.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Adin, but it took about a month and a half, maybe total for everything. We launched it October 1st, and I believe we sat down and started talking maybe August 15th or something along those lines. However, ours was very intricate. So I'm sure that there are a lot of different, depending on what you're looking for an AR experience, different timelines associated with what program you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds about right to me. Typically, lead time is really dependent on the scope of the project, what kind of 3D assets are involved, what kind of interactivity or kind of gamification is involved. In this case, I think it was about 5 or 6 weeks, with the last couple of weeks dedicated to sort of polish and refinement. But I think that 4 to 6 weeks is generally a pretty good estimate of a lead time for a campaign of similar complexity.
Okay. And some more specific questions around like how the WebAR campaign was put together, Adin. Some questions are around the background. Is it a panorama image? Was it a 360 video? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we took the approach of having what's called like a skybox, or what really is a dome. And on the inside of that dome, we have a high resolution. It's actually, we used an approach where we took a frame from a video, and then for the waterfall portion, we had a plane that had a looping video on that. For the entirety of the dome, that was just a static frame, just again to save on file size. We found that we initially deployed the experience with a full 360 dome video, and there wasn't really a whole lot going on in the video except for that waterfall in the background was moving. So again, just going back to the point of cutting on file size as much as possible, we decided to just take that single frame of the overall scene, map that onto the dome, and then keep that single plane which had the waterfall on it, just to keep the size low. And then of course we have lots of 3D elements on the ground in front of the user. So it's really, you can imagine as sort of like a half dome scene with 3D objects in the center of it.
Okay, and Rachel, I believe you mentioned that this was a sweepstakes campaign. So was that the primary call to action? Is that kind of the straight line that you were hoping people would finish up on? And if so, knowing that this was more of an experience that you would explore and discover, how do you direct people to that critical endpoint?
Yeah, I'd say that first and foremost, when we started planning, it was definitely the primary call to action. We were looking for a new way to engage consumers through sweepstakes than we have traditionally done before. So I think in previous years, even still recently, we do a lot of sweepstakes wherein the consumer just texts to win. So they get like a 5-digit code that's standard and get a lot of text to wins, or they go through a website. However, we do see a lot of sweepsters, as you call them, that are like people that have these technologies that can just automatically apply for like 10 sweepstakes in 10 minutes. So we're looking for ways to first and foremost avoid those people winning the prize because we don't feel that they really care about going through the experience and engaging with our brand. And then secondly, just wanting to make sure that we got larger engagement for our sweepstakes and larger impressions on it, which I think even in just the few first weeks that we've launched this program, we've already gotten more interaction out of the sweepstakes than our traditional avenues in the past. However, we do have multiple calls to action throughout the experience as a whole. The other being the ability to go on and buy the product through the e-commerce platform. And kind of as things have developed, namely being the fires in California, we decided to add in a cents per case program wherein for every case of Pure Gold 6-pack sold, we'll give $1 back to the National Parks Foundation, which was something that we kind of threw at Adin kind of like in the last few weeks that we were about to launch this project. And we were like, hey, we want to do this too. Is that okay? And they seamlessly were able to integrate it. Yeah, it was a good cause. So we wanted to make sure it got the awareness that it deserved and was able to be interactive and additionally drive consumers to purchase.
That's great. A question here on what other types of experiences can be done with WebAR portals. Maybe Adin, if you want to take that, this obviously was like a branded experience that was an actual place in the world with product visualization and branded moments. Any other ideas or insights on how WebAR portals can be used?
Absolutely. I think you could probably broadly categorize WebAR portals into teleporting users to a real physical place and then teleporting users to a completely synthetic digital environment that doesn't really exist anywhere. So in this case, it was the former. We worked to replicate an existing place, but yeah, you could certainly build out a 3D environment that doesn't exactly exist anywhere. And really, the possibilities are limitless when you're working in a 3D space with the ability to build any kind of 3D asset. I'm not sure how to answer that other than just saying anything is possible.
Okay, I love that. One of the questions that I have here is just in terms of the recording. We will be and are recording this webinar, and we'll make the recording available via YouTube link, via the email that will go out as a follow-up from this webinar. So just so everybody is aware. Let's move into just some advice that we have. It seems developers, brands, and agencies on the webinar today. Rachel, just from your experience and working with Aircards and with WebAR, what advice would you give to brand marketers that are on the call today as they start to think about using augmented reality as part of their marketing mix?
Sure. I mean, the same as any marketing campaign, I would say, first and foremost, identify your objectives early on. What do you want to gain out of using AR as a means of reaching your consumers? For example, ours was the sweepstakes and making sure we have a higher lift in people that are engaging or entering the sweepstakes than we have in traditional senses. And then even driving to retail was something of importance to us as we kind of considered our campaign in the beginning. Additionally, finding a meaningful connection to your brand. So making sure that it's an authentic match. So for instance, like driving to nature with our match to a USDA organic beer kind of just made sense. But you want to make sure that when you're considering your brand and kind of the brand objectives, making sure that the AR experience matches what you want to achieve and what it means to the brand. And then last but not least, just making sure that you have a communication strategy on how to actually get that QR code out to people, whether you're printing it on your product or marketing materials or using social as a means to communicate to your consumers, I think is really, really important as well. And Adin and his team have a lot of people associated and people that can help create some content and create creative that you can use to do so.
That's great. Great advice. Adin, on your side too, maybe developers or agencies.
Sure. I mean, I always like to think a lot about user experience almost to an obsessive level. And one thing that we certainly took into consideration with this campaign, I think in general with AR is really important, is just showing users instructions in 3D and in 2D. So there are certain situations where users might not be looking at a specific item that they need to interact with, but you want to call their attention to that item. So in those cases, a 2D instruction that sort of appears as an overlay on top of the camera view, outside of the 3D space, is appropriate. Whereas, there might be cases where that a user is looking at a specific object or entity in the scene, and then placing the instruction actually next to that item for them to engage with it. So I think that just keeping in mind that users could be looking in any direction, and placing your instructions appropriately based on that. For example, in one of the previous iterations of this campaign, we had the instructions to walk forward into the portal. We had it on top of the portal door, and we found that a lot of users were actually sort of holding their phone, looking down, and so they didn't look up to see that, and a few people were a little bit confused. So we moved it down to just within their line of sight. So I guess in short, just consider how your users are holding their phone and where they're looking, almost to an obsessive level, and make sure that they're always going to see instructions that are placed in 3D space. And if you can't guarantee that, just put it in 2D UI, so that you're sort of forcing the user to read the little instruction that you want to show them.
That's great. So
yeah, and from the client level, even sending it to other people to have them test it and walk through. For instance, when you were talking about the portal, that insight was based off of like one of our colleagues' girlfriends tried to go through the experience, and she was like, "I'm confused. What do I do?" So that having other people try it out and maybe seeing a path or seeing something differently than what you're seeing definitely helped make sure it was very clear what we needed to communicate to the consumer.
Yeah, I love that. I love that we're really focusing on user value, user experience. I mean, one of the things too with this being web-based is that you're able to make changes in real time, make it the iterative process is very much something within your means. And so even doing A/B testing or watching your analytics and course correcting and improving along the way is definitely available. I'm going to start to wrap up the panel conversation before we put up the QR code. I have so many comments and questions around, can I try this WebAR portal experience? Yes, it's coming. I'm glad you're all excited. Maybe just final thoughts, Adin and Rachel, as we wrap up the conversation today. Rachel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, one thing that I would note is there are so many different types of AR experiences that you can go through. Portal is, as Adin mentioned, just one of them. And get really creative about the ways that you incorporate it into your brand plans. For instance, Michelob Ultra in the future is looking to incorporate it more into their e-commerce platforms with their retail partners like 7-Eleven, and having it like if it was an interactive game, for instance, having the points that you achieve in your game actually go to redeem points towards coupons or anything within the store. Obviously, you need to make sure that there's legalities that you should be aware of when in consulting any of those things, but just getting really creative and looking into other opportunities beyond just web portals. There's games, scavenger hunts, things that you could do that we're all looking to incorporate into our plans for next year.
Great. Adin.
Sure. Yeah, firstly, I mirror all of that. And I think that one sort of key thing to just keep in mind is we're all really just used to thinking about creative in 2D because video and sort of static imagery has been the paradigm for so many years. And so just keep in mind that sort of mental exercise of thinking about scenes and your marketing messaging in a 3D environment where you have this completely new dimension of digital real estate in a way to place 3D versions of your product, or to place messaging in 3D space that can be discovered in different means. So I think that would be sort of a key snippet for me. Just think in 3D, even though it might be outside of the bounds of what a lot of people are used to, including myself. Because so much of the content that's out there these days is 2D. Really just challenge yourself to think in 3D.
Mm-hmm. 3D creatures thinking in 3D. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Well, listen, Rachel, Adin, thank you so much for this really inspiring and engaging conversation. I'm going to wrap up today's webinar. Thank you for everybody who has also attended. We will be making the recording available to you. And now I am going to be sharing my screen where you will be seeing a QR code that you can scan with your smartphone and get to try the Michelob Ultra Pure Gold campaign yourself. So Rachel, Adin, thank you. And I'm going to bring up the QR code